Let's start off by looking at the data. What's the data telling us? What are we seeing going on around the world? I'm very delighted to introduce Angela May, who's a long-standing colleague working at the UN Office of Drugs and Crime. So Angela is the chief of the research branch at UNODC and co-produces and responsible for the World Drugs Report, which provides critical intelligence that we as global advocates use around the world, and also civil society contributes to in terms of validating and supporting. Angela, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it goes, right? So, thank you. First of all, I want to apologize because a few minutes before 3 I have to run, so I apologize for respecting for the other speakers and the discussion, but I just have to catch the plane. So I wanted to start by just telling you a little bit about the World Drug Report, because I heard also in other section, maybe people talking about what you may or may not find in the World Drug Report. So I want to spend a few minutes to tell you what you can find. And basically, when you go to the website, you find all of these 6 elements. And I'll start by the last one that I will display in the next slide. I'll tell you more in details what it is about and what you can find. But basically, in the last one is where we put all the data that we collect from member states. And so you will find there, I'll show you how you can find it, basically the incredible amount of data that we put together. We develop regional, global estimates, analysis. You find maps, you find graphs. I'm talking about hundreds. So things that you can also use, hopefully, for your also maybe presentation or to advocate for something also with governments. Then we have what we call contemporary issues on drugs, and that's where we do the qualitative analysis. And so we have some topics that we dive in every year. This year, so the one that we just released, we had an whole analysis on the impact of drug use on health. We had also a chapter on organized crime and drug trafficking, and then a chapter on the impact of drugs on the environment in Europe. So that's where we put actually more together qualitative research, and that's where also often we base on qualitative interviews that we do also in different countries. Like, for example, for the next World Drug Report, we have started doing some interview here in South Africa to inform a chapter that we will have on the impact of drug use on security. And then what we do in the next one, the key findings and the special point of interest, is that we bring all of this together. In the key findings, you can find what we call story. What is the story about cocaine? What is the story about synthetic drugs, the latest? What is the story about drug use? Again, so that's what you find. And then the special point of interest is what we call, our executive director actually pushed us to do something like this. They say, she calls the minister product to understand what is that the minister needs to understand on the latest drug issues. And then there is a lot of, you see, statistical annex, data portal, the methodology, maps, etc. Again, you can find a lot of resources there. Now, I'll start by saying, I hear a lot when people talk about the World Drug Report, they say it includes only official data. Well, actually, it doesn't include only official data. And indeed, the backbone, as I was telling you earlier, is what we get from member states. So if you want the official national data. But we use also a lot of other, statistics, data from other international organizations, but also a lot of academic literature, and also from a think tank, civil society. Quality. What we care about the information we use to inform the World Drug Report is the quality, not who produced it, but how it is produced. And then, as I said, we also have some field studies to inform. So now I want to tell you about what do you see in that icon. That's where you find really the old resources with data. We have about almost 500 pages, for this year World Drug Report, with hundreds of graphs, visuals, etc. And you can search by topic. You can search by type of drug, by topic, by region. So somebody in a section yesterday say, well, but the World Drug Report is always empty for Africa. We really made an effort to put together everything that we can say about Africa. So that's just to invite you to use more the World Drug Report, again, for your own work. Now, we talk about opioids. So why do we talk about opioids? And I would start by asking the question, when we look at the type of drugs, we tend to think, why should we focus on one or the other? Answering, what is the most harmful drug? And what we see from the data that we have is that, it's not a unique response. Here, what I'm showing you here is the percentage of countries, among the way how we collect data, we also ask a country, can you tell us what is the drug that cause most drug use disorders? What is the drug that bring most people in treatment? And what is the drug that cause most direct deaths? And here is the distribution of countries, not people. It's the distribution of countries that reply and say, which one is. And what we can see, and I'm presenting this, but I could present you also other data on deaths, on use, etc. We'll make the same story. But it's just that here it shows it clearly. If you look at direct deaths, clearly, the blue is opioids. And the greenish, this is opioids, and this is cannabis. And this is ATS, and this is cocaine. So the majority of the countries, and again, look at deaths data is the same, opioids are really the ones that continue to cause most of the direct deaths or overdoses. The indirect deaths, if you look at the indirect deaths, most of the indirect deaths are relating to infection diseases. But again, maybe, also from opioids. But when you talk about people in treatment and people with drug use disorder, you see that basically country split between, and cannabis is also, considered for many countries as the drug that, whatever is relevant and what is harmful, but that's what, again, the data say. Now, if we look in general at drug use, if we trickle down and, take, again, another broad issue of how are we going or are doing with drug use globally, the number of people who use drugs is the yellow bar. You see that continue to increase. This is also a reflection of more people living on Earth. So, but there is also, and you see the dots here, is the percentage. So there is both also an increase in the rate of drug use, again, globally. So you see almost 30% increase in the last 10 years on number, but also about 15% of prevalence. And that's, it gets the rate of increase. And also when what we call people with drug use disorder, basically is people, with dependence. So now, if we look at the opioids specifically and the number of people who use opioids, you see that actually after an increase in 2020, that is more than an increase, actually reflect better data that we had particularly from India and Nigeria. These are big countries, but when we got new data, then, increase all of a sudden all our global estimates. But overall, the number of people using opioids per se, globally, has not really changed much in the last 5 years or so. While we see actually other drugs, cocaine, ATS, the stimulants, globally, we can see more clearly an increase. Now, when we talk opioids, I think we need to realize that it's a mix. It is important to look through this because different class, if you want, of opioids may represent different policy issues. And so first of all is the plant-based, the opiates, and then the synthetic. And so again, the importance of distinguish because the plant-based has a restriction in terms of supply and that synthetic drugs don't have. But then there are those that are under international control and those that are not. So I don't have the time to go through this, but I'm saying if we talk about opioids, it's also important to understand that there are different types. And in general, if I had to say, so what is the issue? What is the challenge that we face also with opioids are different. One is, and is very particularly here in Africa, is what we call the non-medical use, or if you want, the traffic of pharmaceuticals, the tramadol, codeine, for example. That is, for many countries in Africa, is the drug issue. It's not, very often what I see, at least at global level, is that there are certain drug issues or certain drug types that get a lot of attention because they are a problem in high-income countries. And the high-income countries can go to many conferences, they can speak a lot, etc. And so there is sometimes, an idea that what countries that, if you want, are more powerful faces becomes the challenge for everyone in the world. So I think here is to understand that, it's not fentanyl in Africa, but mostly is what we call the non-medical use. I take that, I saw in a section somebody that say, what does it mean medical or non-medical, etc. for this community maybe, but that's the terminology that we use. Then there are, if you want, the traditional one, heroin, that we have been dealing for decades, centuries. But then there is the issue of MPS, so new psychoactive substances. So those that come to the market and they are very risk, and they bring a lot of risk, particularly for the user because it's not known what they are. And very often, traffickers try. And so even if at the aggregated level, there are not, the majority of the people don't die for MPS, the global aggregate. But at the individual level, MPS can be the most risky because it's not known. And there is this trial that traffickers continue to do in drug markets. But then more and more what also we see as a challenge for opioids is the combinations. So it's the way how opioids come into other type of drugs, or to mixture that are also hard to, first of all, understand. And I'm talking about, for example, sorry, it's not cat, it's kush. In Africa, there is this, and in certain countries, kush has become, again, a really a huge drug challenge, but very often countries cannot even analyze and understand what it is inside. So this is, again, also the big challenge of the opioids because they are very potent, and then in this mixture, they can cause a lot of health issues. Now, just to give you an idea globally, here is two colors and the regions, those that is the share of people that use non-medical use of pharmaceutical opioids, so basically not opiates, and the dark blue is opiates. So just to give an idea that, again, across the world, again, there are, for some, the main issue is synthetic opioids. For some, remains also the traditional, good old days, heroin. Now, as Matt mentioned, from the plant-based, and what, if we were here maybe 10, 15 years ago, we would only talk about heroin. Here is what is happening on the supply of heroin. And you can see the production. This is the production of opium globally. And you see that in the last 2 years, and this year we are looking at the data, and will be basically among the same line. Basically, globally, because of Afghanistan, the heroin market is shrinking, and Matt said, we start seeing the shortage coming also. But it took a while, and we have an interesting analysis that has nothing to do with the topic of this conference, but it's interesting to see that, why there has not been so suddenly in the shortages, but there were a lot of large stocks in Afghanistan, and who gained from those stocks are mainly the large traffickers and the large farmers, and the smaller farmers are the ones that actually paid most of the consequences of the shortage. But okay. Now, what I wanted to say, and I'll show you a series, quickly, a series of maps. And these are seizures. And again, I know, I haven't seen anyone presenting seizures, so that's why I thought maybe because for some of this, we see really, again, globally expanding these markets of non-medical use of pharmaceuticals. But again, have their own challenge. But okay, it would deserve another presentation. But here why I wanted to show you the seizure is, one, because we don't have data at aggregated level, we have few data at national level, but we don't really have data on use and impact and of these things. And so through the seizures, what we can do is at least identify the areas where these are big issues. And here is, I'm talking about tramadol, and you see, for example, the great majority global seizures are in Africa. They're not only in Africa, and people die also. There are overdoses of tramadol also in Europe. But the where really is it concentrated is in Africa. And particularly you see here, where it concentrates in West Africa. And so this is really I would say, one of the main issues for Africa. The same is for codeine. Again, not only in Africa, but if you see here the seizure, you see that the majority, the last data that we have, were in Africa. So, and we heard also from Nigeria, they're saying that they're really experiencing, I think they call it an epidemic of non-medical use of codeine. Here is also for methadone, not much an issue in Africa, but a lot in Europe, and particularly in Eastern Europe. And there is methadone that is illicitly produced, particularly in Ukraine and Russia, but then it goes to the market as and to finish, I wanted to talk about, even if it's not an opioid, pregabalin, because this is something, again, that we've been seeing expanding very rapidly, particularly in North Africa and the Middle East, but we don't understand yet who is using it, why, how, etc. So it's all to explore. Unfortunately, we always have better data on seizures than on health and in use. And so we try to extrapolate what we can to also try to understand what we still don't know from the use side. Now, you mentioned, Matt, the issue of synthetic opioids and the threat that we have now globally. And I don't know how many of you have heard, I guess, many netizens. And, while the whole world has been looking for fentanyl and being alert for fentanyl, looking at what is happening in North America, actually what has been popping up is not fentanyl, but is a class of netizens. So they are actually more potent. You see here this infographic, an idea of, there are many netizens as there are many fentanyls. And, but just to say how much more potent even they are. And they are popping up particularly in Western, but for example, on this Kush that has been analyzed, that is originated in Africa, there seems to be also netizens there too. And so this is something that is really challenging, testing facilities, that require a lot of monitoring, and again, has started as fentanyl started, cut into other drugs. But now, and I talked to Senad from EUD, and I think it would be interesting to hear from him what is happening on nitazene in the Baltic states, that actually, has it happened with fentanyl, now users actually are asking, they want nitazene. So the nitazene is expanding as its own market, but I'm sure, I hope you have the time to hear, because it's very interesting. And here is just that where we documented what is happening about nitazenes around the world, where, they are starting popping up again, everywhere in all regions, deaths relating to nitazenes. Now, I want to conclude, I have 3 minutes, but to show you something in the World Drug Report, because I saw that you have been discussing a lot, this issue of the criminal justice response to drug. And I want to tell you that what you find in the World Drug Report is also data we estimate globally. How many people are arrested is the first line, so about 6 million globally. How many are prosecuted and how many are convicted, and for what? The lighter color is for possession and use, and the red is trafficking. So the line that you find, the storyline that you can find in our key findings, is that the criminal justice response focuses on those that do not, and to speak the language of those that are also interested in resolving drug markets and security, etc. We are saying is not efficient. Because, bringing these people into the criminal justice response, they don't address the illicit markets. So, and here, I don't have the time, it's 2 minutes. I wanted to give you a flavor of the kind of information you can find. Here is the distribution of countries based on whether is not an offense. I'm starting from the lighter color, is not criminal, depends on circumstances, or criminal, for different levels, personal use, purchase, cultivation, trafficking, production, etc. So you see that for personal use, It varies. And when we analyze by region here, we see that really Africa is the most punitive continent. And so another thing that you can find is also the distribution of the threshold, the criteria. If the countries use a criteria like threshold to distinguish between criminal and non-criminal, and here is also the availability of alternatives to conviction and imprisonment. And in contrast to this, the health response, and here is data on the percentage of people that are in treatment, in drug treatment, as the number of people with drug use disorders. And you see that in contrast to this kind of criminal justice response that focus on drug use and possession, where there should be a strong response in terms of providing the services for drug use, you see that overall just 1 out of 8 people with drug use disorder globally are in treatment. And for women, is 1 out of 18 women, and for men, 1 out of 8. So, and here you see it by region. And again, you see certain region like Africa, we cannot have a sex disaggregation because we don't have enough information, has the lowest coverage of treatment. And I conclude, 50 seconds, to show also the availability of, we ask also countries to tell us about harm reduction, the availability of harm reduction services. And here you see how countries respond and say, for example, 76% of countries, they say that they have opioid agonist maintenance available. It's not just available, it could be one. Here is the availability, here is in terms of level of accessibility, and you see that only a small proportion of countries can say that they have fully accessible these services. Here, when we ask about naloxone, I mean, to note these colors that basically are countries that do not reply. So they don't even tell us no. They just don't reply. And so this is, you see how, limited is the availability of naloxone, and here is the coverage of needle syringe programs. And again, you see here, most of the countries don't even tell us, don't even say no. And so here is where basically are the countries that at least report that they have. So with that, I think I 0-0.
Great.
Thank you.
Very much, Nicola. So let's. So Angela's got to go to leave to catch a plane at 3. So if there's anybody who would like to ask a question to Angela, let's take a few questions now. Any questions that people have got, please come to the microphone and we can take it. Please, Marius.
Hello, I'm Marisa James from the city of Athens. I work for the city of Athens. And I'm a peer worker and harm reductionist. It's just 2 quick remarks. It's about pregabalin. What we have noticed, in my country, it's not prescribed, so you can enter to a pharmacy and you can take pregabalin. But what is going on is that the pharmacies around the drug scenes are not selling without a prescription pregabalin. I take prescribed pregabalin for many years, and there are people who denied me access in the pharmacies, which is absurd. What we have noticed is that specific groups of street dealers are cutting a synthetic opioid with pregabalin for injecting use. And this is why this is causing the whole thing. But it's a thing totally under the radar of the Greek Monitoring Center and under the radar of the harm reduction services and everything. So it's like an ongoing secret pregabalin crisis. That's the one thing. The other thing is that you mentioned naloxone. We have an opiate overdose epidemic in my country, which is again under the radar. We have specific scientific researchers that mention non-fatal and fatal overdoses, incidents, and deaths. And what is going on with the legal framework of prescribing naloxone is something really weird. We have every 2 or 3 years a new law that makes one step further, but we still don't have access to naloxone as peers or street workers, except if we are working for a state-recognized entity, or we have a prescription for a doctor. But who's going to go to a doctor and ask, but seriously now, ask naloxone for whatever? I just wanted to mention these things because a lot of things in Europe and in the world in general are totally under the radar and far beyond the official narrative. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting.
Great. Any other comments, colleague?
Yeah. Tom Santo from NDARC, and kind of along those lines, I was wondering how fully accessible is defined and how countries choose to report that, and if they give client numbers in relation to how many people are receiving, say, needles, and then estimates of injecting and things like that. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we don't have, I mean, what I show you is all the information we have. It's very hard to ask this information at national level. But I understand, I know Harm Reduction International produce this kind of data, and, but we are not in the position to be very specific, as you said, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senad Handanagic, I was called from Angela from EUDA. Thanks for this nice presentation. More a comment than a question, but yes, I think the field of synthetic opium is changing so quickly, so rapidly, that I think we need to think differently about the early warning systems and mechanism through which we can detect this early enough to report. What Matt was saying, that's just one piece. In Europe, we have analysis of syringes that people use, where we test there, and we find many nitazens and combination of drugs there. We have drug checking services, drug consumption rooms, all of where people are using drugs, where we could learn more about the types of drugs, and they could be then used to inform the community. So I think we are building this, and this needs to be built more, and only with the collaboration with civil society. On that topic, we had a really nice threat assessment on highly synthetic opioids in Baltics. If somebody wants to read it, it's on EUDA, it's available, and it's also translated for the Baltic languages, which is quite nice, where we also have some suggestions, not only how to reverse and how to clinically prevent that, but also how to build the systems that could detect those new substances that are coming. And just to clear that, like we even see in Baltics that nitazens are already peaking. So now we are looking at cyclosporins and other drugs that are totally different field that are already coming in, and we are detecting them in this system. So this system, this is changing so quickly, and we need to adapt our monitoring system to inform the communities.
Thank you very much. That's great. So I think...
I have one question.
Please go ahead.
So it was exciting to hear that you get data from a range of official and unofficial sources, and as I reflect on the gaps in the knowledge, what kinds of unofficial data will you accept, so that for those of us in the room that have the ability to provide some data, what would be helpful?
Thank you. Thank you for asking, because I thought one of the things that I learned in these 3 days, I'm so excited to see, and I'm really thinking, I go home with the idea, how can we tap more on what the great information that I've seen here. And I mean, the type is quality data. Something that is not, we don't do advocacy. So we wanted to have really a factual, and something that we can also defend on member states. Go back and say, and we are always ready to defend when we have strong quality. But I was even thinking, and maybe a conversation, how can we maybe use also this community of Institute to maybe construct a way to channel more to the global, but something to discuss offline. Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
We should arrange like informal community meetings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So look, I mean, one of the things that we have is the UNODC Civil Society Group on Drugs and HIV has been a key mechanism between civil society and particularly the regional and global networks and the UN partners and Harm Reduction International plays a key role in terms of bringing civil society data and civil society validation into the World Drugs Report process. So again, there's strong civil society engagement. Of course, this is an incredibly complex process that takes a huge amount of time, and the timelines are tight. So it's challenging, and we're grateful to Harm Reduction International for playing the lead role for civil society in this partnership. So should we move on to our next speaker? Let's thank Angela, who has to leave us.